Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today I'm going to be working on a very large applique project. It's going to be 30 inches by 48 inches. Now I can always make it bigger by adding borders or a larger background on. But when you have a fabric that large, you're going to need to piece the background. So there's a little tip on piecing that background, and there's some tips on appliquing large pieces. And don't forget, large pieces means less pieces to cover a surface. So join me as I share some of my tips on appliquing large applique pieces. So this is the applique quilt that I'm working on. It's this nice big truck, and we're looking at 30 inches by 48 inches. Now we can do that with the length of fabric if we do not have directional fabric. So we can get 1.5 yards, that's going to give us that length. But if the fabric is directional, then it's going to be going in the wrong direction. So we will need to piece it. This particular pattern, you can get it with the pattern, so it comes with that layout. It then comes with all the pieces that we can trace out on our Fusible web. But we also can get an additional piece to this, and it's the Fusible already printed out for us. So we have that Fusible on one side, and they're already done for us. And they're also put in sections. This section would be the dark, perhaps black for the wording. We have car pieces, and that one color that is recommended is in each separate area. So we don't really have to figure out where all of these pieces are going. Once I know that color, I'm going to be able to put that whole piece on one applique shape. The Fusible web is a flexi fuse. And with all fusibles, be sure to follow the direction because all fusibles fuse at different times and temperatures. So I'm going to take time and fuse these onto the colors, and I'm going to work on my background fabric. We could piece it in 2 long strips. However, by doing that, we're going to have a seam right down the center. That seam down the center will definitely be more noticeable than if we put the seams in other places. For example, if I have a seam coming down this area where the tree is, it's not going to be as noticeable. If you want, we can do 2 seams. So the other one could go along this area. When we're looking at a piece and we're trying to figure out where to seam the background fabric, we need to look at 2 things. Number 1, is there an area that's high enough to hide most of that seam? And if not, divide it up so that it's on one side or the other. Those seams will be more noticeable in the center than off to the side. So I do have this fabric, and it has these world maps on it. And because it is directional fabric, I will need to piece it. When fusing this flexi fuse onto the fabric, we do need to fuse it on the wrong side. That way when we cut the pattern out, we do have the good side facing. But sometimes we do end up with the Fusible that's rolled. And sometimes that roll makes it a little hard to put on this fabric. Well, I do have a trick on how to place this paper onto this fabric. Heat up that fabric. Now we can take this and just smooth it out with our hands, and it sort of stays in the position that we want. So at least we can now move it a little bit without it constantly rolling up on us. The heat sort of relaxes that paper. It gives me time to put it where I really want it, and now I can press and fuse that paper on. I do like to warm up my fabric and make sure it's good and flat before I start. Give it a little bit of a press on one side. So it was a very light pressing. Then I'm going to just give a light pressing from the other side, and that way I make sure that there's no wrinkles in it. Let it cool down, turn it over, and make sure that that's all stuck on. Do not want it on really firmly, because when I do the final pressing is when I'm going to give it that full 5 to 8 seconds. I just want it on enough that I can work with it. It's definitely handy to have all of the same color in the same areas. If your pattern does not have the design so the same color is in the same area, I would recommend to put them in the same area. So if you're drawing them out yourself and you know there's certain pieces that are going to go in black, draw those pieces that are going to be in that black close together on that fusible web. Then when you do go to press it, it's already there. Most appliques are designed so that the pieces are numbered in the order that you're going to use them. And in this case, that gone quilting is the same. So I'm going to cut them and put them in order. So if I have 27 pieces, number 27 is going to go on the bottom, 26, 25, and so on. Even if they're not cut out, I do put them in order. So I have all of my pieces cut out and they're put in order starting from 1 and going down. I do use these trays. They're not really trays, they're stretched canvases that you can buy in the craft and hobby stores. And I just turn them upside down and use them as a tray, and then other times I leave them upright. And that way I don't lose any pieces. It's lightweight and it's easy to store. I did piece my backing fabric. So I have it pieced on one side so that it's going to go through the center of the tree. And I have pressed the seams open. And that way there's not as much bulk. But having it on that one side, you're really not going to notice it. And a good portion of it is going to be covered by the pattern. So I do have that full-size template, and I'm going to fold that paper in half right in the middle of that tree. So that fold line is going to go along that one long seam. Open it up, and now I'm going to make some registration marks that will match the pattern piece to the background fabric. I'm going to mark those halfway marks, but I'm also going to mark some other marks. So I'm going to mark all of these extra areas that I'm going to put marks on. I will be using a chalk marker, something that I can see on that fabric. I'm going to mark along the one edge and then coming up. So when I move the fabric, I'm going to have this little T shape. So I'm going to do this little T mark on all of the marks that I've put on this pattern piece. I will also chalk these corners. These marks are going to help me line up all of my applique shapes. Because this is a very large applique, I'm not going to be able to get it all on an ironing surface. We are not going to transfer all of these lines onto the fabric. What we're going to do is use this actual paper to help us lay down those applique shapes. So the first one will be the tree, and those are 1 and 2. So I'm going to bring this to my ironing surface, and I'm going to lay it on this part of my iron. So that surface is not big enough, so I do have the pattern pieces just hanging over on the side of the iron. But the piece that I'm working on is going to be on the ironing surface. And from here, I'm going to take this placement paper and fold it. Now we can fold it in different ways. I can fold it along that seam that I wanted, or I can fold it horizontal. And in this case, I'm going to fold it horizontally. I'm going to fold it right along that center line. Now I will take that paper, and even though it's folded in half, I'll match it up to those top registration marks. So all of my marks match up. And we can put a couple of pins just to hold it in place. So I have part number 1 and part number 2. I will be removing the paper from the entire piece, and I'm going to place that entire applique right over top of that placement piece. There's only a portion that I'm going to be able to line up, but the fabric's going to lay flat for me, so I don't need to worry about the placement here. This top part is lining up. I'm going to fuse that bottom part. Just give it a light press, and now I can pull back that paper, Straighten up the rest of that applique shape and finish pressing. Portion 2, I'm going to do the same way. I'm lining up that top, I'm going to hold it in place, and I'm going to press just the piece that's on that fabric. Now I can remove the rest of the pattern, just slide it out of the way. You can see how it's already going to stay in that position. I just need to straighten it out a bit, make sure it lays flat, and press number 2 on. 1 and 2 are done. I need to find number 3 on this paper. And because I have those pieces in order, I'm going to have a good idea where they're going to fit. Line up all my marks, put a couple of pins to hold them into place. So I'm going to fold that paper back just a little bit. Now I'm going to be able to lay that out. Take off that back fabric. I'm going to put a couple of pins to hold it down because it is a long piece. I'm only pinning into that paper area. Now I'm going to be able to press just the piece that is on this fabric. Now I can take those pins off, lift up that paper, and finish pressing that down. If there's a piece that's supposed to match up, I do take a peek underneath before I give that a press. I'll be able to find my next number and go from there. I will be trying to work on this as much as I can just by folding this layout page. So I have the outside secured with pins, and I'm going to be able to just fold small parts. And it doesn't mean you need to fold it in half going in. I can do a little roll till I expose an area that I need. For example, number 5 is the part of this wheel. I'll take that paper back off, secure that top with a couple of pins. Now I could just roll this paper underneath, flatten that paper a little bit. Now I can hold that down, press that one portion, take the pins out, flip the whole page, and press. Number 6 is another wheel, and I'm going to do that the same way. If your paper is a little rolly, just give it a light press. There are going to be some incidents where we're going to have to fold that paper inside. We won't be able to roll it, but we do have our placement lines, and we can see that previous pattern. So it'll give us a good idea where those things are going to go. The whole key is having this paper flat. This applique piece needs to be as flat as it can so that it can line up. Once I have all of the main pieces done, I will then give it its good press. In this case, dry iron for 5 seconds. Now we can let this cool down. We still have the words to do. And I'm going to do the words just a little bit different. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure the words are nice and flat. And I'm going to get some parchment paper. Now, parchment paper is something we use in the kitchen. You would buy it where you get your wax paper. I'm going to take that parchment paper, cover the writing, and pin it down. And what I want to do is iron on only half of the lettering. I do have the paper taken off, so I can line it up, and I'm just pressing half of it on. Get to the next letter, press half. So I have half of it not pressed. And I'm going to do the whole word that way. So half of it is stuck on and half of it is up. Now when I take this paper off, I'm going to be able to fold this and do that same technique where I'm going to be able to iron half of it on and then continue. And that Fusible will come right off of this paper. Now I can take these words to my quilt. We need to fold that paper down so that half the words are showing. And now it's really easy to decide where we're going to put them. We can put them where they're recommended, or we can find our own placement. Once I have it in the place that I want, press down for a second, wait for this to cool down. If we move it while it's hot, the glue has not set yet, and we're just going to remove it. Once it's cooled down, we're going to be able to gently remove this paper. and that applique will come off quite easily. Now it's in the place that I want. I can just finish pressing it down. Now I can do that second one. The one thing that I did not put on the parchment papers were our little dots, and I'm going to put those on after. All of the appliquing is now done. And here's the area where I have those 3 pieces pieced together. But because these are long, they did cover a good portion of those seams. When pressing, I did keep those seams flat, so you don't notice that seam at all. So large applique pieces like this are very easy to do. It's important that we do mark lots of placement lines so that when we do fold this paper and roll the paper, that we keep the pieces in order. And pin as much as you can on the ironing board. This parchment paper really does come in handy for the words, and if you have something that you need to stack up, you can use the parchment paper over and over again because the Fusible does not stick on it. This has definitely been a fun project to do, and you can get it just with the directions and the placement paper. And if you want to, you can always buy those applique shapes already printed on a Fusible web. So that definitely saves some more time. So I do hope some of those tips and tricks on piecing fabric together for the background and for laying out these big pieces has been helpful. And thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and let's see what we're doing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now. And I need to now go quilting.